Okay, so I think what we had today was it blue-green deployments? Let me go to the, was it project contour and then community? I'll just share and then you can see what I'm doing. Desktop one, go. Yeah, so we had set up some schedules for things to talk about. So I think one was if you go to the Project Contour site and go to community, down here is this Contour office hours link. So probably where you all found this link. Last week or last time we were going to talk about some of these things and we didn't quite get to them. We did a little bit about how to contribute. And this week we had blue-green deployments and canary deployments. So we can run through that if that sounds interesting. So I have some old school demos that I've done sort of forever. But what I don't have was seeing how my clusters looked locally. So let's go ahead and take a look at that. So let's just destroy everything and we'll start from there. So I'm using kind. Let me make my fonts a little bigger for y'all. Where's my thing? There it is. Okay, let me go and I was working on something as well. Okay, so excuse me, if I do a kind get clusters, I should have a couple. Nope, I don't even have Docker running. Off to a good start. Docker makes my Mac turn into a frying pan where it's so hot I can like cook eggs on it. So I've been trying to turn it off as much as possible. I guess we could go to the cloud and do this, but it's more fun to do it locally. Come on. There we go. Okay, so I do have kind. So I have kind cluster, which is I use for local development. And then I have a cap V. So when I mess around with cluster API for vSphere, which is kind of cool. That's why I have two of them. So we can go ahead and delete our cluster. And then what I do is when I dev, I can do kind create cluster. I'll run this and then I'll show you what it looks like. So in the repo, we actually have this sample kind config. It's under examples kind. Move this out of the way. And what this does is this, when you develop in kind, this will map ports from basically your host on port 80 into the container, which is port 80. And our examples here, when we deploy Contour, they deploy Envoy as a daemon set. And we map port 80 on the daemon set to host ports 80. So then therefore, when you have this mapping here in kind, basically localhost port 80 will map to Envoy running in your cluster. So now we can do fancy things with curling Envoy and testing out ingress without having to port forward into the container or into the cluster. Cool, so here's our cluster coming up. Once we have that, we'll just go ahead and deploy Contour. Hey, Michael, looks like you joined in. We were just kind of going over some blue-green things with Contour, unless you had anything else that you wanted to chat about.
No, I'm good. I'm going to do some more testing on the 404 stuff that I raised an issue on, and having a debate about case sensitivity of domain names. I think there's an issue for that too.
Yeah.
But no, I'm good.
Cool, very cool. So at this point, I have a kind cluster. So if I go ahead and get nodes, I should have two nodes. And again, I have the control plane and I have a worker. Just to demonstrate this, if you do a Docker PS, what you'll see is I have ports 80 mapped to port 80 in the container. Again, so localhost 80 is now pointing to Envoy. And again, Envoy is our data path component, so all traffic is going to route through that. So we'll go ahead and apply Contour. I always use the examples just out of habit. And this is going to deploy the master branch. So for good or bad. That's what this is going to do. So again, what we created was a namespace for Contour, some service accounts to run under, all the CRDs that we need, which are basically the HTTP proxy, as well as the certificate delegations, which that'd be a good one, Jonas, to talk about, certificate delegations. That's kind of cool.
Yep.
And then we deploy all the other bits. So let's go ahead and get pods in Project Contour. And here you see I've got, we deployed 2 contours by default. You can have as many as you'd like. Contour will do leader election, and that leader election only defines basically which instance of Contour can write state back to Kubernetes. So things like the ingress status information or status information on any HTTP proxy. You only want to have one of those do that. So that's what lead election does. Otherwise, they're all active servers for Envoy. So they can be that XDS server for any Envoy running in the cluster. Out of the gate too, we have this default cert gen, which generates certificates. And those certs are used for communication between Contour and Envoy. Since they aren't running in the same pod, we want to secure that connection so that XDS traffic is secured. So again, we have a sample here. You can absolutely swap in your own if you'd like. And I only have one Envoy running because I only have one worker node. Again, if I get nodes, you'll see I have just one. And that's there. Cool. So at this point, I should be able to curl localhost 80. And I'll get nothing because there's nothing in Envoy yet. We haven't put any configuration into there. Contour doesn't ship with any listeners by default until you deploy some resource, which we had some debate on in the past. Should we do that or not? We almost should have something there just to fail health checks. I guess it's going to fail as it is now. But so if I look at, not that. I was just going to port forward and show you the config. Port forward, Project Contour, Envoy 9001. So the admin port for Envoy is by default is 9001. And that's what Contour will configure, again, by default. And you can override that in the config. It's only running on localhost, so it's not exposed to anything else other than port forwarding in that pod. So now if I do localhost 9001, you'll see this is the config now for that instance of Envoy. We can also look at that by doing, I get pods. Project Contour, you see it's 8R-VPJ. That's the name of the pod. We match that with the service name, excuse me, for the pod. So in here, there should be, a service cluster, which we call Project Contour, and then we have the service node. And there's that 8RVPJ. So that's how you can understand what instance you're connected to if you didn't know what localhost port forwarding was going on. Again, so the reason why we got the failure there, so if we go out to our listeners, you'll see all we have is the stats listener. So there are no listeners on port 80 or 443 until we deploy something. So let's go ahead and deploy something. So what I have is, I have this demo app that I use for lots of things. And what this does is this will deploy basically a sample app here, which is this deployment. And then we'll deploy a proxy to do some things. So let's go ahead and take out some of this stuff. And again, if anyone has any questions along the way, just jump in because it's, we can chat about whatever you'd like, whenever. It's going to take this part out here. All right, cool. So I will go ahead and we will apply O1. All right, cool. So what we did is we created some sample apps in the namespace root proxies. There we go. So we have 2 apps, one called Secure App and one called Root App 3. And then we'll go ahead and deploy this, this generic proxy here. So this is going to use local.projectcontour.io. So what we have is we have this domain name set up, and it points back to localhost. So if you ever want to demo in kind or anything locally, you can use that domain name because Envoy wants to forward L7 traffic, which is using domain names for all that for the routing bits. So you can use that if you like. So we'll demo that. So let's go ahead and apply this one too. So we will apply the O2 proxy default. Cool. So now what I have is, if I get proxies, I have one root proxy, and we've got an error with an include because we haven't deployed that part yet. So let's just take this part out. And we have that one too, root proxies. Oh, I renamed it, that's why. It should be root app 3, I think. Okay, so now we're valid. And you can see here we have this local project contour.io. So if I curl that one now, what I should get is that app respond. And this is a sample little like echo app. It's helpful for these kind of demos for knowing what requests you passed and then, excuse me, the headers that get set on there. So if I pass something like, you know, Steve Chris is wearing a hat, you'll see that it replies back with the request you sent it. So again, it's helpful in defining or figuring out where you are in the requests, because you can define this message that gets set here. And it tells you the pod or the deployment name that did it, and then the headers. So again, it's just helpful for playing around. And that worked too, because this is a path prefix, just to make things clear. So right now, Contour only handles path prefixes. So because we gave this service basically slash, so conditions define the path, right? So I can have conditions here. And when you define the prefix, you get this by default if you don't define it. And because it's slash, it matches everything, right? So when I had that big long URL, it matched because Steve, it was a path prefix. Cool, so we have that. It's not terribly exciting. Let's go ahead and pass off some more things. So Contour has this idea of inclusion. And the way to do this is a way that you can have multiple namespaces manage their own ingress resources without having to redefine things over and over like you would with ingress today. So with ingress today, you'd have to define you know, the domain name and everything over and over in each namespace where someone wanted to handle that. There's also some issues where folks can kind of clobber each other in terms of paths and domains and stuff. So this theory that we wrote is kind of one way around getting around those issues with the team management. So what you do is from the root, you can delegate or include different proxies into this proxy here. So that's what I had commented out here. So what this is going to do, if I add this includes here, this is going to say, hey, the proxy named blog site and the namespace marketing is going to get /blog, right? So we're going to give them permission to own /blog in their namespace. Once we've done this, it's kind of like DNS, like they own that whole path. They can do whatever they want with it, unless something else comes along and changes these set of conditions. And again, this is a set. This is an array here, so you can have other things like headers as well. You can pass off header things, which we can look at. And this leaves us opens the door for other things if we wanted to in the future. If we want to do a path, maybe a path type and not a prefix type, et cetera, et cetera. So if I go ahead and apply this, you'll see the same error we got before, where I get proxies. You'll see it's invalid now. And it's invalid because we've said, hey, let's go include this other HTTP proxy, but we don't even have the market namespace, I don't believe. Let's get namespaces. Yeah, I don't have a market namespace. So it doesn't exist, so it gives you an error. So we can go ahead and create that. So in here I have this marketing thing. So we'll go ahead and apply that. Marketing, and we'll go to O1, user namespace, and we can do the apps. And we will go ahead and do this one as well. All right, so now what should happen if we go ahead and get our proxies? What you'll see now is I have two. So we just created that one. We can look at the details of that in a second. But we created the namespace marketing. We created some sample apps in that namespace, and we created this proxy in here called blog site. And what we've done is from the root, which we call the root proxy, which is the one that has the domain name on it, we have that inclusion method here. So in here we've said, it's in here. We've said again, the blog site proxy gets /blog. So now if we go ahead and do some curls with /blog, what we should get is the blog site here. And you'll see that we have the name here. It says the blog site. again, because we've given permission to that. Now, again, in our get proxies namespace marketing, you'll see that we have just that one proxy in that namespace. So the idea here is that the marketing team can self-manage their own resources, right? Because now we've delegated that permission off to them. They can manage it themselves. And the root will still work too. So let's go ahead and prove that. So blog is owned by the marketing team. If we hit /, that's owned by the root. And again, because these are prefixes, if I do /blog /Steve Chris, you'll see that the blog site still owns it because we've included that path to them. So they're managing that whole path prefix /blog. And then if we hit just the root, we'll get the root app here, the default site. Or if we do Steve Sloka, any other kind of path that doesn't match /blog, then the root's going to get it, right? Cool. So let's go ahead and deploy something else. So let's see what we have in the marketing namespace for pods. Right, we just have one. Let's go ahead and create a second thing in there. Looks like I got a blue-green thing here. Let's go ahead and deploy these two things. So I have a blue deployment and a green deployment. So go to marketing and we'll deploy blue. And we'll deploy green. Cool. So get pods. So now what I have is I've got a blue deployment and a green deployment. So let's update our proxy to look at the blue deployment. So what we'll do is we'll go to the marketing namespace, or the marketing proxy, and we'll change it from using the www blog service to using, I think it's blue. Cool. And we'll deploy this one. This one will be O2 proxy. Cool. So we'll do a quick check. We'll get our proxies. I guess we'll do it all. Cool. And they're all valid, which is great. Let's do a quick curl to /blog. We should get blue now. Yep. Cool. So we get blue. So what I like to do is do this little curl thing. I'll do a while loop. And we will curl this every maybe half second. And let's take off the I. We want /blog. Cool. This one's using a little HashiCorp pod, which is kind of cool. It works similar to the Echo server, but all it does is echo out text. You'll see why it's kind of nice for this kind of demo. So we'll set this over here maybe. Cool. So again, that's curling the blue site or the /blog every half second. So if you want to do a blue-green deployment, there's a couple ways you can do this. You can do it with swapping out the service under the hood. So let's go ahead and clean this up a little bit. So right now we're pointing to blue. In theory, I could just change this to green, right? And if I apply this, again, what you'll see here is as this is curling, it's out of the way. If I apply this, I should just switch over and then we'll get the green site. And here we are, it says switch to green. If we make this blue again, you can go back to blue. That's one way to do it, right? One way is just to swap out the services. Some teams like this, some teams don't. Another cool feature of HTTP proxy is that you can actually have multiple services here. And this is something that if you did this with Ingress today, you'd have to do like label selectors and certain things. Label selectors, again, services to kind of make this work, which can totally be a thing. The problem then is the weights are difficult to manage because you'd have to manage replicas of the service. So here what we can do is we can pass multiple services here, and this is kind of getting into a canary deployment. But again, if we want to look at a blue-green deployment, we will add weight here, and I could say, hey, blue gets 100% or 100 weight of the traffic, and green gets 0, right? So if we apply this one, nothing's going to change, right? Because we essentially have the same thing. These weights are defined based on your own arbitrary numbers. So in my head, I like to think of them out of 100, but you can do them out of 5 or out of 3 or out of a million. I'm not sure if there's a high number limit. There probably is somewhere, but you can go pretty big. I can make this one, 100,000, and it seems to work fine. Cool. So if you want to do blue-green with this one, you could just then swap the weights, right? We could switch the weight from the blue to 0 and make the way the green won. So if we apply that one, that'll swap us over to blue-green. Again, there's another way. And the last thing you can get into doing is things like Canary deployments, which you can kind of see here. So again, let's swap back to our blue deployment. Cool. So we're on the blue one now, and say you want to migrate over to your green one, but you don't want to do it all at once. That whole example where you want to kind of throw in certain users at a certain amount of time. We can throw in maybe 10 and make this one 90. And what should happen then is we will, every 9 requests will get blue, and then the 10th one should be the green site. And there's a green one popped in there, as you can see. Cool. Once we're happy with that, we can make it bigger. Go 50-50. And now we should get about every other blue-green, blue-green, depending on how Envoy is going to cache our requests. We can then reverse it and go 1090. So we'll shift most of our traffic over to green. So now green should get most of it, and then blue should get every 10th request. Again, once we're happy, we can swap that out and just go all the way to green. Cool. So that's Canary. The last way I didn't describe was if you wanted to swap out blue-green, another way to do it would be to swap the inclusion. So what you could do there is out here on the root. It could be on the root or wherever you're defining the include. You could swap it here. So say you have your marketing namespace as your production, and maybe you have like a marketing dev or something as your dev site. If you wanted to swap that, you could swap out where the inclusion points to in your cluster. And that's how you can switch namespaces. I've heard of folks wanting to manage new versions and whole new namespaces. So you could swap that with the inclusion model there. And it doesn't have to be in the root, because you could actually include the root here, and you can include it yourself, I guess. So what I mean by that is I can leave this inclusion here, but then in the marketing spot, if I want here, yeah, I could have an inclusion to myself. So I could take off the marketing namespace, and call this, the site, and then create my own inclusion within myself and pass off things once I have, what I've included. In this case, this would be slash. That makes sense. So it's another model to do it. And no right or wrong way. It just depends on kind of what you'd like to accomplish. If your green deployment is in the same namespace or a different namespace, that sort of thing. Does that make sense? Does that fit how you thought it works, Steve, Chris?
High five. That was a good demo.
Cool.
Sort of just listening in the background, Sloka.
It's all good. Yeah, so you can do things. You can add more to this too as well. So if you want to add more things like, the more fancy things come are conditions. So you can add, things like header conditions and such to make these more interesting, depending on what you'd like to do again. So you saw it on here. I pulled off some of these things. We can add things like, here, we'll swap this one on. Yeah. Come on. I forget this spacing. It's in, okay. So here what we can do is we could update the marketing one, again, /blog, and say that it has to match set of conditions of /blog, as well as the user agent has to be Firefox. So if we apply this one, this is what O2 proxy. Cool. So now if we go ahead and query this one, we'll stop this guy. If we do our curl to localhost.projectcontour.io/blog, what'd I do? Oh, it's not localhost, it's just local what I get is not what I thought we'd get. Did I apply that? Oh, not contains. Haha, there you go. So I faked myself out. So yeah, so this one you can do different options with the headers, right? So you can say contains or do the reverse of it, not contains. So this is actually saying the user agent is not Firefox. So my user agent here is curl. But if we popped open Firefox and did the same one, so I did local.projectcontour.io/blog, what I should get is the default site, right? And I'm getting the default site because the conditions for /blog on the include say it's got to match the path /blog as well as not being the user agent Firefox. And in here, I should have a user agent Firefox is right here in the user agent header. So we hit the root one because that's the default one that matched, right? Because we were too specific. But curl works and Chrome should work as well. I'll do a new window here. Pull this one over. And we get the green site here because we're matching /blog and we're not Firefox because we're Chrome now. Again, you can swap this in and switch this out and say contains. We'll go ahead and apply this one. And now this should reverse. So now Chrome should get the default because now we aren't Firefox, we're Chrome. And Firefox should swap in and become the green site. And it does, because now it matches the header conditions of green or of Firefox as well as /blog. So yeah, it depends on, again, what y'all need to do in your environments to make this work. Yeah, that's how you can do conditions. This is gets kind of powerful. When you get it all set up, the only downside we've seen folks come up with is that you can only have one of these routes. And it's something that we've kind of been talking about is how we can maybe allow this kind of model, but allow multiple routes or allow people to self-manage their own resources without this inclusion model. But
hey, Steve, I need to drop it. What's the sample app that you're running behind there that returns all the headers?
This is just
cool.
So this one is one that I wrote. I can share with you. It's just a silly app that I wrote. The other one I'm using for the blue-green deployment is one from HashiCorp.
So I wrote one years ago in Rust as a Rust experiment that sort of still works, but it's sort of out of date. So this looks cool though. I think we'd have interest. I mean, I want to try and encourage people to start trying to use, because people in our company are still in the mindset that they need to introduce a separate API gateway to do things like, load balancing, like 50 or 60-40 type stuff, which they don't need to do. Right. And, being able to put this sort of blue-green into the ingress also makes sense.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it'd be interesting to write this up internally and do a demo.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, this is the simple server here.
Echo server. Okay, cool.
Yep, you can grab that one. And, yep. I think I added a thing I have to push where I return JSON to. So if you want to parse a JSON response to simulate some sort of API payload, then I was going to do that as well. But yeah,
that's cool.
Yeah,
I mean, the Rust one that I wrote pulls a little bit more metadata about actually where it's running as well, which can be, you can sort of show what's the pod name type thing.
Yeah, that'd be actually cool to use. Cool. Yeah, to add. Yeah, we used to use the Cordy one for a lot to do that, but it sort of has some windows and iframes and things that make it hard to demo.
Yeah, that's not good.
But it does those sort of things too. That's sort of nice. But this one's just real lightweight, which I like.
Yeah, I mean, some of the other ones, like, is it? I can't remember the name of it now. QUAT or something, or QApp. I can't remember. It's like a hello world, but it's enormous. So like it pulls in this massive dependency tree, and it's like just need a simple hello world.
Yeah, we use the HTTP one a lot too, which is nice.
Yeah, that's also pretty big though.
It is, yeah, but it just has lots of cool stuff in it in terms of seeing, auth things and all the different pieces and portions. But yeah.
That's cool. Thanks. I got to drop it. Thank you for that.
No worries. Yeah. Thanks for coming.
Bye now.
Cool. So I don't know what else to chat about. We can keep going, or we can. What did I have? Blue, green, and canary, which I just did all that, I guess. Yeah, I don't know if anyone else has any other questions or anything.
I've got none. I just got off
Yeah.
another call
Yeah.
with a peer who is doing Spring Cloud Gateway that has some of those same, the predicate prefix path. One of the other interesting parts there is rate limiting. And as I was watching, I was like, well, there is a lot of overlap here, but it depends, right? It depends on how you're deploying, where you want the developer to have control. And all the other compliance things. So yeah, no question, just a comment.
Yeah, no, for sure. Yeah. Spring Cloud Gateway is pretty cool. I have some friends that are big Spring nerds, and they use that for all their stuff just because it fits in their tool chains and things. I used to be a .NET engineer a while ago, and when you're on Windows and Windows Server and SQL Server and all those sort of things, it all just works together with Visual Studio, and that whole ecosystem fits, which is nice. So yeah, no, there's lots of cool things there. We do have rate limiting out on our roadmap. So if you come out here to community, probably should update this roadmap a little bit. But some things that we're looking ahead as to what we're going to add to Contour. But rate limiting was on this list somewhere. Can't find it now. There it is. Rate limiting support. So I know the big thing we're looking at doing was security. So adding an auth service to this, which sounds simple in practice, but in reality, it's much more involved with that. So James Peach has done a lot of good work with defining some of the design around how auth should work. And the cool part about that is that it matches a lot of the auth design will map how we can do rate limiting, right? So you've got to define and Envoy this external server. So you connect Envoy to this external server, and basically when an auth request comes in or a rate limiting request comes in, that external service will give you a thumbs up or thumbs down saying, yep, let it go, or no, error out and return this response. So there's some design in here. This one here. It's worth a good read to figure out how we're looking at doing and deploying or implementing these different services. But with this work, this is the hardest part, is getting the design down. Once we have the design down, then we can kind of just implement it, which is sort of the easier part. But and this will change, I'm sure, as we get through it. It's sort of like how you think it in the front, how it should all work, then you start doing it and you realize reality doesn't match what you thought it was. So, but right now this is what it is, and it centers around having this external or extension service CRD. So being able to define kind of what that gRPC service will look like, and kind of the information around it. Then you can use that to inject that into Contour and basically Envoy, and then that sets up Envoy to then communicate with that service. So we should have that soon, I would think. Rate limiting is a little more tricky just because it has, or potentially could have, so much more configuration per route and per domain, that sort of thing. And then things you want to rate limit on. So we'll get there, and that's coming soon. Again, that's why I wanted to call out this roadmap here. That was off here, and then we're going to obviously match with Ingress v1. So I know we demo a lot of HTTP proxy and that sort of thing, but Contour still supports v1 beta 1 Ingress today, as well as Ingress v1, which is coming. And that just changes a few things in the spec. One is adding an Ingress class, and then one is adding, I think, a path type into there. So we're going to do that stuff as well. But yeah, this is sort of our finger to the wind kind of roadmap, what we're going to work on. And then also, obviously, too, the services API work is going to come into this play, which is down here, I think. Yeah, this one. So services API, or service APIs, I keep making it plural, is sort of the next version of Ingress, and larger scheme is services in general in Kubernetes. So that work, I know the Contour team has been a big part of, James and Nick, as well as other folks in the community. So we'll see support for that as well. We actually have support. We're watching the objects today if they exist. We just haven't done the implementation bits of it yet. So that's coming out. Cool. Some new folks to join. I'm not sure if you have any questions. So we're just talked about some blue-green deployments and some Canary deployments and such. So happy to take questions. Throw it in chat or
Awesome.
just unmute yourself.
No, I just wanted to say thank you guys for doing these things. It's awesome to work with this community. It's definitely been one of the most active, vibrant, and helpful. So it's really important that proxying, works and that we can do what we need to do. And this is good. So thanks for hosting this.
Yeah, no worries.
Hey, Steve, I did have one question real quick. So I think, I was actually had a question about, I think I was asking yesterday. So one of the issues we're having is with I think it's export HTTP, like HTTPS, right? So if we have services on the back end that are running HTTP and we've got Contour that's managing our certs, when they do a redirect, right? The application will tell my browser to redirect to HTTP, and then, but the problem is that I'm getting some security errors because there's a protocol mismatch, right? And from what I understand, the proxy protocol, there's an exported proto header that can get attached to the request that the internal web server is supposed to know, hey, everything is actually over HTTPS instead of over HTTP. So I don't mean to be confusing. I just was wondering if this is a common thing that people face, if that's how they solve that, or.
So, okay, so your backend pod gets a non-TLS request, right, over HTTP.
Correct.
But I guess how does that happen? How does it get there anyway? Because
Yeah, so the request comes in through, we're on AWS. The request comes in through the AWS load balancer. And then it gets routed to one of the, I'm guessing Contour or Envoy deployments in the daemon set. And then that's where TLS stops, right? And when it hits that daemon set, the app, so then that gets forwarded to the actual application itself, right? Through HTTP, right? So TLS termination is at the Contour/Envoy level, right? I'm sorry, hold on, let me shut my door.
No worries.
Yeah, so SSL termination is at the, at the Envoy/Contour, and I'm not sure how that relationship between Envoy and Contour works exactly. Okay. But I assume it's Envoy that's actually handling, the proxying, and then that gets essentially forwarded via ingress, right, into our Kubernetes pod.
That'll be a pod.
Yep. Okay. And so the load balancer to the Envoy, I'm assuming is HTTPS, right? Because the SSL termination happens at Envoy. And then from Envoy to the pod, it's HTTP. And the problem is, so that'll be HTTPS. Yep. The other one will be HTTP. And the problem is that, so the Kate's pod thinks it's running HTTP. So when it tells the browser to do like a login, redirect to a login page, it's actually telling the browser, it's sending the browser a 302 with the location of an HTTP. And I think the way to get around that is there's a standard exported proto header for, it's the proxy protocol. Yeah. That should be set by Envoy to tell our application, the web server in the pod, hey, we're actually running HTTPS as an upstream protocol. And then that way it would tell the web browser to redirect to an HTTPS site, not an HTTP, because right now we're having the browser's blocking it because of it's saying, oh, you've loaded this from HTTPS, but now it's requesting HTTP, and it's essentially blocking that request. So, I don't know if this is a common thing. I would assume it would be, because we're using iframes to embed. And that's where that security issue, comes into play. So if I load it just in a browser, it's fine. But if in the iframe, it's being blocked because of this mismatch of protocols, essentially. So hopefully it's not confusing. And we don't have to answer that now. This is one of the issues we're working, kind of working with now. So.
Yeah, no, sorry, I understand now. So in my head, I was thinking something different. So to me, the pictures helps me to look at them. Yeah, so let me see real quick. You should get that header. I have some GKE cluster here, I think, which I think is stevesloco.dev. Yes, okay. So this is just a cluster out in Google somewhere that has TLS. So if I curl, I should get that. Yeah, here's the exported proto. So this is the same echo server we were looking at in the demos before.
Okay. Yep.
So this should be your scenario. So this pod is deployed here in the back end, and it's not TLS, and we're terminating. This is the exact same setup, and it does so that the pod will get the header, but the response back to the client won't. So if you look at the headers up here, like the client doesn't get that header, but the actual pod does. So it should have that, if that helps. Here's the IP address of my house, I guess, which is probably bad to show the world, but
yeah. And I think it would depend on how the pod, right? So like if the web server on the pod doesn't understand or know about the X-forwarded proto, right? Then it's not going to know to, actually set the redirect to HTTPS.
Sure.
And so one of my thoughts was, well, you know how we've got an add and remove as part of like the functions for request and response headers.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was like a 1.10 feature or something like that, or 1.10, or I don't know. It was back in January, I think it was. So my thought was, well, what if we added like an add, remove, and also maybe like a replace? And maybe one thing we could do is say, okay, for every response that we're forwarding on back to the browser, for a location, replace HTTP with HTTPS. And one of your, like, maybe there's other use cases where like a replace function may be useful, in the proxy, essentially, right? So like if people wanted to like, be able to like really, edit headers that were forwarded on, and we've looked at the code a little bit, to kind of see, and I didn't see any sort of like edit. So yeah, see how you have the set and the remove. Yeah. I didn't see any sort of edit function available. So it may exist, but I'm not sure. So
yeah, I thought set would do that. I thought set would either set it or override it. Let's just try it real quick. So if I do, we'll just do it on the one I have here. So if I edit, let's go in here and make this.
Hopefully I haven't hijacked the meeting, Steve. Sorry.
No, this is 100% what this is for. It's just to come hang out. Yeah, I had some things we were talking about just to kill time in case folks, didn't have anything to talk about. Just, so we don't just stare at each other blindly. So that's the reason why I had a little agenda, just to help, again, set some ideas. Do you want to change this to what header, I guess?
Location would be the header that we would want to essentially.
Like this, location? And then. Yeah.
And so location would be like HTTPS, like app.example.com/login, right? So right now, what the location header is HTTP app example login, and we want to essentially change it to HTTPS app login.
Have that today, so we can set. We want response headers, though, right?
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah. Let's change this. Okay, cool. So to slash should hit the root app, and then it should add this. It's a bad demo, huh?
Yeah, no, yeah. I mean, it definitely works. I mean, we're doing some setting of some stuff. The reason I'm not sure if a set would work is because we actually need the information, because we don't know the full value, right? It could be app.example, it could be app1.example, app2.example. What we need to do is we just need to essentially replace a part of that location that's being set by the app. We need to just replace part of it, not necessarily like reset it to something static that's defined in the manifest.
Gotcha. Yeah. Yeah, a lot of this is static things. It's not dynamic. That's where folks have asked for like Lua filters and such, where you can actually write dynamic code, which you've kind of shied away from just because you can get in a lot of trouble quickly with that. But at the same time, if you need to solve issues like this, then you've got to solve them somehow, some way.
Yeah. So we're just kind of throwing around some ideas on our side. Like I said, this isn't something we have to solve now, but I just wanted to maybe throw it out there, to you guys, maybe say like, oh yeah, we've actually solved this, or somebody else, or you're thinking about it wrong, and there's actually a protocol for this, because we were looking at the proxy protocol, hoping that it would be. But my concern is not all web servers are smart enough, right? Like we may deploy apps where people have created their own kind of mini web server, that doesn't handle things like a lot of the standard protocols for like layer 7 proxies and stuff like that. So, but anyways, we'll carry on and in the Slack channel and stuff. But just wanted to,
No, for sure. Yeah, it would be great if you wouldn't mind if you could open an issue out in Contour,
yes, definitely,
on the site, and that helps us because Slack is great for this kind of chatting. But then I feel like we lose track of it.
Yes,
I know by tomorrow, next week I'll forget, and then I feel like you get lost because I forgot about it because it's just stuck in Slack. So. This is a great place. I think if you open an issue, then we can, maybe folks can chime in and add their 2 cents as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that'd be great. Yeah, and describe it, and then we can discuss it there.
Yeah, I think I was going to do it. I just wanted us to do a little bit more investigation on our side to make sure that we're approaching it correctly before filing an issue. But we have some ideas. We've been looking at the source code for Contour and. Trying to look at some standard protocols and stuff like that. But anyways, yeah. So that's one of our one of our things we're working on. So. Yeah.
No, very cool. Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, and that's a place we've seen. Contour fulfilling those needs for folks. Like even with auth, we're looking to add that sort of stuff. Where folks operators don't have control over that backend app or can't force them into certain support certain things. So. This middle proxy layer has to do that work for them to help manage that. So
exactly. Yeah. That's why it's like so important, but it's super great. I mean, we've been absolutely just loving Contour so far. So it's been a wonderful product. So.
Very cool.
Thanks,
very
guys.
Cool.
Yeah, I gotta hop off. I got another meeting I gotta hop on here.
No worries.
But thank you, Steve. I appreciate.
No worries. Thanks for coming.
And I'll on the next one.
All right. See ya. Cool. We hit the CNCF store. Did you all see that?
I did not see that.
Yeah, so if you go to the CNCF store, there's Contour, and you can get your hoodie, your face mask, some stickers. Although I have stickers here, I meant to give out at some sort of place. I have a whole pack of them, but we haven't left anywhere in a while. And then t-shirts. So it's kind of cool.
Sweet.
Yeah. The gray's kind
official.
of, yeah, we're official. Yeah. I never had a gray one, like a light gray like this. So there's only 2 left. So yeah, that's kind of cool.
Nice.
Get your swag. Still sort of surreal to see us out here in this. It's kind of cool. Sweet. Well, that was fun. Yeah, here's the listeners we talked about before. So now we have that. Since we created an object, we have that HTTP listener. Yeah, so when we started this whole thing, we were talking about how there were no listeners created. And there's that listener there. So it got created. Yeah, so yeah, did you have any questions, Amit? I see you're on the chat there for a while.
Actually, I am new to Contour.
Yeah.
So like, I just wanted to know like how actually what I've done is like I've made my Envoy as a front proxy, and I've configured rate limit and circuit breaking and all those things, and even I have written my OIDC filter for Envoy. but someone in my company told me to use contour for routes, to configure the routes. So I just exactly wants to know where contour fits in a big picture.
What do you mean, like where it fits in your cluster, or?
Yeah, of course. Like how, like if suppose I send a request, it hits my envoy first, right? Because my envoy is running as a front proxy. But where actually contour fits in this picture, like where it actually comes in, like it is like it comes before envoy, or like my request hits the contour first, and then it routes it to the envoy, to the filters that are running in envoy, and then filters then eventually called the service to the gRPC. I mean how it actually works. I mean
Sure.
where it actually fits in. I mean the bigger picture I'm trying to understand.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So this is a good diagram here to kind of walk through the architecture of Contour. So Contour actually doesn't handle any traffic at all. We let Envoy do all of that work. But what Contour does in this world is it's the configuration server for Envoy. So it's the XDS server. Yeah. So Contour's job is to go watch the cluster for endpoints and services and secrets and all this information that it needs. And then it kind of works
So
as
all the traffic, it comes to the envoy.
What's that? I think you're breaking up a little bit on my end. I think I may have lost you. Can everyone else still hear me? Steve's shaking his head, yeah.
I can hear you. I can't hear
Okay.
him anymore.
Yeah, sorry, I think we lost you. Lost the audio at least. Yeah, we still can't hear you, but if you come back, then we can, sometimes if you drop and come back, there you go. That'll fix it. Boom, boom.
Steve, have you spent much time with Rego?
No, I haven't really. James did a quick walkthrough with me before, so I'm going to stand up because my back hurts.
I've looked at it a couple of times, and I don't know. My brain is not able to like wrap around it. Yeah, it looks like a normal programming language, and then it's just not.
Yeah. So I miss chat totally. Yeah, so I struggle with it. I think one of the things that James did was he wanted to have like each test sort of be self-contained. So like the test will contain the deployment manifest and all those sort of things all in one. But I still can't get my head wrapped around it either. I just need to do it more, I think. I don't know.